Hey, wake up, you're sleeping, and then you'll know the truth. We need to be able to discern, we need to be able to detect, we need to be able to determine these lies that are all around us because they are swarming around us. And we need to be able to do that to prevent us from falling subject to them. As appealing as the outside may be, the inside might just be deadly. We are going to be in the book of John with a sermon titled Lies of the Enemy, chapter 8, verses 32 and 44. So if you've got a Bible with you, go ahead and get to the book of John. We're going to be kind of all throughout the book of John, really, but those are the two focal scriptures that I have selected for today. And if you don't have one, we do have some back there in the lobby. And if you ask real nice, Jim back there might get one for you. But I want to start off with just the idea of the notion that something that I think this is something we can agree upon. It's a fact that truth is what sets us free. The truth is what sets us free. It is something, biblically speaking, we're not talking about a concept. We're not talking about an idea of something. Biblically speaking, we're talking about a person. Because Jesus didn't just come and say that he claimed to only speak the truth. He claimed to be the physical embodiment of truth. In the book of John, chapter 14, verse 6, Jesus answered and said, I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. See, to know Christ is to know truth. And to reject the Bible's truth is to reject Jesus. And when we get caught up in the lies of the enemy, when he starts spewing things at us that trip us up and get us to spiral out of control, what he's trying to do is he's trying to remove us from the presence of Jesus. Because if he can remove us from the presence of Jesus, what he can do is he can remove us from God the Father. Because Jesus said right here, the only way to God the Father is through him. So his tactic is, let me trip them up. Let me get them away from the presence of Jesus. We know he's never going to leave us, but if we can believe a lie that he is going to spew towards us, we can certainly wander away and walk out of the protection and the plan and the purpose of which Jesus has for us. So that's what he is trying to get us to do. The enemy wants nothing more to feed us more lies and lies and lies and lies. He wants us to just feed that over to us so that we can get out of that presence of God. So I want to ask a few things here. Are you feeling like, or have you ever felt like you can't hear his voice? Feel like God isn't working? Or do you feel like he's sitting back and he's watching a dumpster fire of a life without a plan? Because if you've had those feelings, and that's just a small sample, there's many, many other things that we can start to believe. But if you've ever felt those in particular and a few others, then I have another question for you, which is, what lie have you accepted as truth and you're currently believing or have believed? Because when those things start to seep in and we feel like God just isn't really there, and we feel like there is just something that is spiraling out of control, there's a lie that's been set in place that we've decided to believe. So I want you to take this as something that periodically what we need to do, every day perhaps. We need to commune with God. We need to talk with him. We need to speak with him. We need to ask him questions. We need to figure out from him what lies are swirling around us. And we need to figure out sometimes, hey, what is it that's out there? What's truth? What's lies? Let him show it to you. Let him explain it to you. Psalm 34:17 says, I will hear your cries for help, and I will rescue you. That rescue is the same thing as free, as setting you free. It's the same thing. And it's not free to do what you want, but it's freedom from the bondage of sin. It's freedom from the weight and the pain and the suffering of this life, because I think that's something that we can all agree upon, is that life is pretty hard. On a Youth Wednesday, I try to pound that into the youth, because right now they think their life is so terrible because some of you parents say they can't do something. And I did the same thing. They have got no idea what's in store, because life doesn't get a whole lot of easy, really. There is things that come with it, responsibilities, We know that all too well. And there is pain and there is suffering. And Jesus sets us free from that. So maybe in essence, it does get a little easier down the road, the closer and closer you get to Jesus. John chapter 8, verse 32. And you'll totally be woke like knowing the truth and stuff, and the truth will totally set you free. There was a few chuckles there, because that's the Gen Z translation of the Bible. There is, in fact, a Gen Z translation, and there's nothing wrong with it, because I want to tackle a lie right now. And that is the lie of King James Version only is the thing that has to be preached out of, has to be read, and is the only accepted word of God. That's not true. And with the Gen Z Bible, I went through and I made sure that it wasn't saying anything totally stupid, okay, as far as, what it's trying to relay. The only people that really understand what that Bible is telling you are these teenagers. I do it on a Youth Wednesday every once in a while. My key verse, I'll read it to them in their native language because they know what it means. And I go baffling. But at least with the Gen Z Bible translation online, you got the Gen Z Bible here, and it is the King James Version on the other side. But you can do this compare and contrast, and you realize that it is telling you exactly what it is once you know what their language is. And I know that some of you guys may have some PTSD because the word woke is in there in today's culture. Don't get caught up on that. It's not meaning what you think it is. It literally just means to awaken, to wake up. In this context, it say, hey, wake up, you're sleeping, and then you'll know the truth and stuff, because there's other stuff. They always have to throw in extra words. I don't really understand all of what they say. Sometimes I just nod and smile and wave. Yep, okay. And the truth will totally set you free. Not partially, but totally. All right, and just to make sure that I don't get a Bible thrown at me because I put a Gen Z Bible or a Gen Z translation up here, here's another translation for you that you might be a little bit more familiar with. Well, maybe there was supposed to be one, but it's not up there. No, I'm sorry. Our technical difficulties, I told you, are not really working well with us. But here's the thing. The translation that I was going to go with was out of the NIV, and it says, "Then you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free." The word "then" just implies exactly what the Gen Z was telling you. When you wake up, then you will know the truth, and it will set you free. We need to be able to discern. We need to be able to detect. We need to be able to determine these lies that are all around us because they are swarming around us. And we need to be able to do that to prevent us from falling subject to them. Lies are what is the native language and the native tongue of our enemy, the devil. John chapter 8, verse 44. It says, "You belong to your father, the devil, and you want to carry out your father's desires. He was a murderer from the beginning, not holding to the truth, for there is no truth in him. When he lies, he speaks his native language, for he is a liar and the father of lies." And that was John chapter 8, verse 44. I'll try to reiterate a few things here if our slides aren't working for us. And he doesn't really have to try a whole lot to lie to us. And it's because of another fact that the easiest lies for us to believe are the ones that we echo what we tell ourselves already. It's what we already want to hear. It's what we already want to feel. It's what we already believe because we want to battle up here in justifying that it's okay. We've even fought God up here and said, no, that's not it. I know this to be true. We've won that battle already. It's what the Bible describes as our flesh. And the flesh is anything that encompasses our feeding of our human appetite, the things that make us feel good, the things that say we deserve to get what we want because we're awesome, to be treated how we're supposed to be treated, and we deserve to be treated that way because we're awesome. And sometimes they're easy to detect, sometimes they're not. But there's one thing that is kind of true, and that is what the strategy of the devil is. And preparing for this, I came across this. This isn't something that I came up with. I don't know who the credit was, or I'd give the credit to them. It's just a random post out there, but it's so applicable. The devil's strategy is pretty simple. He wants to make sin look normal, and he wants to make virtue, things of integrity and honesty and goodness, he wants to make those things look weird. He wants to try to trip you up and say, what God said you shouldn't do, did he really say that? Did God say it was an abomination, or did he not? He wants you to second guess. He wants you to believe something that isn't true. He's going to try to make it look like it's normal for you to do things that God has said, I don't desire my people to do that. And he wants you to convince you that when you go out and you do something that is for God, people are watching you. People are looking at you. They're judging you. They think you're weird. Yeah. Well, I am weird and good. I'm glad you're watching. I'm glad you saw it. That's the kind of attitude that we should have. But he wants you to feel the other way around so that you won't do those things. If the enemy can tempt us with his lies to feed our flesh, then he can get us to reject the Bible's truth. And again, we established that that would be rejecting Jesus. And it starts with temptation. Temptation and amongst itself really isn't all that bad when you think about just temptation. Where things go sideways is our response to it. When temptation is presented in front of us, when something is tempting, we have a choice. You got good versus evil, right versus wrong, truth versus lie that comes out of that choice. What I'm saying is that temptation is really all around us throughout this world. We can't get away from it. We really can't. We're going to be just walking through and it's just going to be there. You're not going to mean to do something. You're not going to mean to be looking someplace or be at some location or whatever the case may be. The problem is it's there. So when we find ourselves in it, our response to it is what matters. How do we handle that response? You see, the Bible in 1 John chapter 2, verse 16, 1 John chapter 2, verse 16 describes temptation as the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life. Lust of flesh, lust of the eyes, pride of life. There's two really main portions in the Bible that discuss that. We're going to tackle one of them. And we're going to also realize that these aren't anything that's really different in our life today. Temptation is the tool that the devil has. And you may say, well, it's not that bad if it's just one tool. It's the multi-tool of multi-tools. It can look and feel and be displayed in a very powerful way. It can also be something so subtle, because sometimes it's just the subtle things that trip us up because we're not looking for them. It's a very, very sneaky tool that he has. And we want to take a look at that. I want to look at detecting lies through temptation. If that's his tool, if that's his main tool, and he can flip it around in his multi-tool set to go do whatever it is that is needed, let's take a look at it. I want to take a look at lust of the flesh first. And we're going to look at Luke chapter 4 through all of these. Because Luke chapter 4, this is where Jesus is being tempted after 40 days in the wilderness. All right, he's been out there fasting and praying for 40 days. And comes along the enemy. Now he's going to try to tempt him. And so with lust of the flesh, Luke 4, verse 3, the devil said to him, "If you are the Son of God, tell this stone to become bread." Jesus was there for 40 days. He was hungry. And the devil knew it. And he said, if you are, make it bread. He was preying on Jesus' needs. He was preying on the physical need. And we can all relate to that a little bit. We've all been told that we need something and we won't be satisfied unless we get it. Whether that be a job, a car, a spouse, a house, even things that are a little bit more detrimental. Things like food. Food's necessary for survival, but let's be honest, not all food's good for you. My grandmother always told me, if it tastes good, spit it out. Because it's not good for you. I tried to convince her that broccoli tasted good, that's why I spit it out, but she didn't believe me. She was a little wise. Drugs, even sex. All of those things are things that the world's going to, your feelings are going to say, you need to be satisfied. But God has very strong constraints and very strong parameters when it comes to those items. And we need to be able to understand that and not be tripped up by the lie of the lust of the flesh. We need to throw up that red flag. Anytime you are being told, anytime you feel like your physical satisfaction is being put ahead of what Jesus calls for you and has in store for you. When you say that my physical satisfaction is first, Jesus second, there's a red flag that needs to be thrown up. Number 2, lust of the eyes. Luke, still chapter 4, verses 5 through 7. The devil led him up to a high place and showed him in an instant all the kingdoms of the world. And he said to him, I will give you all their authority and splendor. It has been given to me, and I can give it to anyone I want to. If you worship me, it will be yours. When you see what you want, and it's there for the taking, the easy way. The easy way. You know, I'm not saying that this is going to be always the case, but you know, the easy way just may not be God's way. See, the devil was offering Jesus to be King of Kings and Lord of Lords. Who Jesus is. It's who he came to be and to establish. He came for all the kingdoms. And the devil was offering it to him without the cross entering the picture. He was offering it to him without being whipped, without being beaten, without flesh being ripped off his body, without thorns pushed into his skull, without nails driven into his arms and into his feet, without being pierced, without gasping on a cross. The devil said, you don't need to do any of that. Just worship me and you'll have it instead. What we need to do is we need to remember that God's ways are far better than our ways, even if they don't make sense. Even if it means suffering is in the picture. And that's a hard thing for us to understand and come to grasp with. I myself will attest that I'm not a big fan of pain and suffering. I don't know very many people that are. But, you know, if that's what God has in store, then I need to come to the understanding and the grips that his plan is a good plan. Just because you see what your heart desires doesn't mean that you can just take it. What it might do is it might just lead you away from what God has in store for you. Can you imagine what that story would be like if Jesus just took the bait? I'm glad he didn't. I'm glad that that bait wasn't taken. You know, we shouldn't take the bait either. Pride of life. Luke 4, verses 9 through 11. The devil led him to Jerusalem and had him stand on the highest point of the temple. If you are the Son of God, he said, throw yourself down from here, for it is written, he will command his angels concerning you to guard you carefully. They will lift you up in their hands so that you will not strike your foot against a stone. Pride is one of those very strong, powerful weapons in his multi-tool set. Here he tempted Jesus by saying, if you are the Son of God, then just jump. Just do it. Nothing can harm you. You're too good. You're too important. You're too valuable. You're too big of a big shot. Won't be hurt. He didn't take that bait either, and neither should we. But I don't know if you recognize this or not, but the devil targeted who Jesus' identity was. And he did it in the first one with the flesh, lust of the flesh. He said, if you are the Son of God. He didn't say, since you're the Son of God, do this. He said, if you are. He was trying to get Jesus to even doubt who he was. And he's going to do the same thing for us. He's going to try to get us to doubt our own identity. He's going to try to get us to doubt who we even belong to. He wants doubt to enter the picture. He could do a lot once you accept that bait and doubt gets in and finds its way through the crack door. Don't ever think that you're such a big, powerful, important, big shot that God must protect you. God doesn't have to do anything. God didn't just create us because he was lonely. He created us because he loves us. I said earlier that we didn't need Ben and Jake here, and we really don't, because God doesn't need any of us, and he wants us. He wants us. And so, God doesn't have to do anything. It can be very tempting to think that there is so much that I do for the kingdom that God has to protect me. God has to let me continue on. And that's not true. Those are the things of which the devil uses. Those are the three types of temptation that are out there that the Bible describes. And I want to now take them and put them into a life application. I want to take them and move them forward to a life application. We're going to go back through the same order, and I'm going to start with the lust of the flesh and use rest as an example. Let me see if this sounds familiar to you. I'm tired from a long week. I'm going to stay home and I'm going to rest. I'm going to rest from church on Sunday, from a ladies' book club, a youth Wednesday, a men's night, church-wide Bible study, whatever the case may be. Again, whatever the physical need is that you need, you're putting in front of what your spiritual need is. I'm just happen to use the example of rest today, but it can be anything else that supplements that. It's going to try to convince you, your physical need, that you deserve a break. And that's going to combat what your spiritual need is. There's going to be that battle that's inside of you. What your spirit needs versus what your flesh is telling you need. Now, don't get me wrong. God is a big fan of rest. And he should be. He created it. Rest was created. But I think that what we should do, if God is a fan of it, God established it, God was the one to say on the seventh day he rested, then maybe we should do things God's way and not what the devil is trying to tell us, not what the enemy is trying to convince us is true about it. And the portion of rest begins with and includes Hebrews 10:25. That says, "And let us not neglect our meeting together, as some people do, but encourage one another, especially now that the day of his return is drawing near." God's plan for rest never included skipping out on the gathering. Why? Take a look at what's there. But encourage one another. That's what happens when we meet together. We come in here and we get inside each other's Cheerios, and that's a good thing. I've had times before where I have come in here and I have had a beat-down week. Maybe it was a beat-down Saturday, and I'm wearing it on my face. Try as I might, can't hide it. I've had folks in this very church come to me and say, "Hey, what's wrong?" And I have a choice to make at that point. I can lie, and I can say, "Sorry, I was zoning out. Everything's fine." Or I can be honest and say, "You know what? This week has been a pretty bad week, pretty rough. I'd love to talk about it. Thank you for recognizing. And let's talk about it," because that's what we're here. That's what I love about the youth on a Wednesday is when they come in. Is not that they come in and hear all of the lessons and things that happen there, but I love to see how they can be sitting through here as we're getting ready to be started. They see somebody walk through that door right there. They get up so excited and just embrace each other. They're excited for the fellowship. They see a friend that comes through, and that's what they want to have. They want to have that connection. I really enjoy seeing that. Guys night, we need to be going to those things. And I know this is going to sound a little contradictory because I wasn't at the last one, but I was at the beach on vacation. The one I was at before, the month prior, man, there was like 10 of us in that room. And I asked my wife, because I mentioned earlier through announcement, she's the ministry leader for the women's ministry. I said, on average, how many women did you have at your ladies' book club? It was in the 20s. Guys, they are doubling us. And it ain't a contest about numbers, but what it is, the women, the ladies in this church, Maybe even this city, this town, county, state, whatever, I don't know, but at least this church, they are hungry and starving for the word. Guys, our responsibilities as husbands, as fathers, is to lead them, not the other way around. So what are we doing? That's where we need to be. To come together to encourage one another. To sit there and be in the Word with others. Because you know what? Life, again, we said, is hard. Marriage can be hard. Raising kids can be hard. I got my oldest son right over there. He's given me a hard time before, haven't you, Mason? Yeah, that's right. He didn't lie. He said yes. It can be frustrating. And when you get together with some others, and you can talk to them about what you're going through, and they've gone through the same thing, and you start sharing those things, that's what it's like about. That's what we're doing. That's what we should be doing. So that's where things come into play. His rest isn't removing us out of the gathering. It's embracing the gathering for the encouragement. See, the thing is here, you can pretty much see about how the enemy will twist and contort God's word. He obviously knows it. He recited Scripture to Jesus. He knows it too. And you know what? He knows what it means. He wants to reword it, rephrase it, and twist it for it to sound like something else. And it's just enough of a believable. It's not so drastic you may not believe it. It's just a slight twist so that you will. He's really going to come in and he's going to say, did God really say you shouldn't go? After all, you need rest. God's plan for rest includes spending time in His presence, praying and reflecting on His Word to take time away from our everyday work to allow Him to work in us. It's not to go off by yourself, sleep for 8 hours, and do whatever it is you want to do. Rest with what you need. Jesus said, come to Him, all who are heavy laden and burdened, and you will find rest in Him. Jesus is where the rest is at. See, He created it for our benefit. He created it to restore us, not to take us away from Him. It's what the Bible describes as a Sabbath. Exodus 31:14. Observe the Sabbath because it is holy to you. For me, I have 2 Sabbaths because I have 2 jobs. I have my job and responsibilities here at this church, and I have my job and my responsibilities at my job at learning environments. And for me, here at this church, I Sabbath on a Thursday. Because really, my job here is kind of all over the place, all over the time. It comes when you get a phone call in the middle of the night because somebody almost blew up the church with a gas line, right, Jim? Yeah. Comes with a text message in the morning. Comes with somebody that says they need a chat. Comes with Youth Wednesdays, camp that's coming up, youth events, various different times. But I targeted a day, and that was Thursday. The day after I get done with the youth and preaching to them every week on a Wednesday. I picked Saturday for learning environments because I'm working Monday through Friday, where I don't do anything for learning environments. But I'm not set to them either. I'm not legalistic about it and say, nope, can't do anything because today's Thursday or today's Friday or Saturday. I'm willing to shift it around based on the week. But that's my target, and I don't just shift it around from week to week to week to week because that creates chaos. There's a structure with it, with the days that I have set. If you don't have one of those days, if you don't have a day at which you Sabbath and you sit there and you rest from your everyday work so you can spend time in His presence, find one. It's very biblical, it's very necessary. God wants you to do that, to spend time with Him, not for you to spend time with just yourself. The lust of the eyes, life application, riches. Riches. I've worked hard for what I got. Why should I give any of it back to God? I wish I had what my neighbor has. I want to be famous too. Maybe you've had some of those thoughts, maybe you haven't, but maybe you even heard some folks say some of those things. They're not completely uncommon, but it's what the Bible tells us and is known as coveting. In Exodus 20, verse 17, you shall not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife, or his male servant, or his female servant, or his ox, or his donkey. All right, now we pause there. You might go, everything's fine. I don't need a donkey. I don't need an ox. Servants are a thing of the past. We're good, right? One last phrase. Or anything that is your neighbor's. Anything. I tell you, my wife would like that word. I don't know if you know this or not, but she has a podcast called Called to Belong. And she loves these words called irrefutable words. You can't dispute it. She didn't pay me to plug in her podcast, by the way. But you should listen to it. It's a very good podcast. She loves these words because you can't say but to the word anything. Anything is anything. It can include things for you to have the desire to have possessions, people, or even status. And you might be thinking, well, it's not a bad thing to want things, right? No, not necessarily. It's not a bad thing that I want to be married one day, right? No, not necessarily. It's not a bad thing that I don't want to be a bum and I want to have some sort of status. I want to have a title for something. Correct. But just because you see the car that you want doesn't mean you get to steal it. Just because it's standing there in front of you or sitting there in front of you doesn't mean you just get to go get it because that's what you want. Because that's what the lust of the eyes will tell you. How about a little bit more biblical example when it comes to people, and think about King David in Bathsheba, where he walks out on his balcony and sees her and goes, yeah, buddy, she's mine. Sleeps with her, gets her pregnant, and then to cover it up and make it worse, he sends her husband, because she was married, to the front lines to be murdered in battle. That went south real quick. How about lying on a job application to get the job that you want? Or taking credit for stuff at your current job to get the job promotion you want? All of those things aren't things that we should be doing. All of those things are lust of the eyes. You see what you want, you do whatever it is that you think you need to do, and do whatever it takes to get it. You just go get it because it's right there in front of you. Again, the enemy knows this well, and he'll dangle something right in front of you that's very glorious, very appealing, very beautiful looking. Much like he did with Jesus and with Eve. You know, one of the differences between Eve and Jesus, other than the fact that Jesus is Jesus, is that what Eve was told, do not touch, do not eat of the fruit. And what is it that she decided to do? It wasn't eat it or touch it. She decided to look. She decided to say, hey, I've been told I can't do something. I can't do this. And then she went looking for it. She decided to take a look at it. And it was so glorious and beautiful. Genesis 3:6 says that it was pleasing to the eye. Once she saw it, she couldn't take away. She couldn't stop looking at it. And I know that that can be kind of hard in today's life because we talked about how temptation is all around us. But you know, if you have something that is a shortcoming or a shortfall that you have, try to put some parameters around that can help you do this. Do your best with God's help to put some parameters up, some safeguards, so as to not look at something that's going to cause you to trip, that's going to cause you to fall. Because it's going to be quite beautiful and glorious. Our goal should never, ever really be to try to keep up with the Joneses, because that's what the lust of the eyes is going to tell you to do, that you need all these things. What it should be is it should be what Philippians 3:10 says, and to know Christ and the power of His resurrection. And it should be to embody what Hebrews 12:2 says, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of faith. For the joy set before Him, He endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. The world around us is full of eye candy and a lot of different shapes and sizes and looks, and we can't fall to the entrapment of what that eye candy is. Because as appealing as the outside may be, the inside might just be deadly. The fruit itself, of which Eve took and ate and did, as she looked, it was appealing, it was glorious, it was amazing. Inside literally was death. With it, sin entered the world. Sin gives birth to death. Well, pride of life application. A ravenous personality. A ravenous personality. You are devouring after things. You are just so hungry for things within your personality. It puffs you up so bad. Pursuit of our own personal gain at the expense and the abuse of others. What it does is it takes us and it lifts us higher than what our created intent was, and it gives us an illusion of God-like qualities. See if any of these things sound familiar. I deserve to have this title, whatever it is, wherever it is, church title, work title, family title, you fill in the blank, but you deserve to have it because you're awesome. I have the right to know all of the answers because I'm the only one who can fix it. I don't sin in that way, so that makes me better. I'm not like those peasants over there. How about this? I'm too good and I'm too worthy. My skill sets are so much better than this. I don't need to be cleaning anything. Cleaning's for somebody that has a smaller or lesser skill set than me. I'm better off with something else because I'm too important. Let me give you a news flash. Not one of us are that great. Not a single one of us. And the only one that held the right to say all of those things put his deity to the side. And Jesus made this statement that said, "For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many." It was Mark 10:45. And I say this, that if it was good enough for Jesus, it's good enough for us. The only one that really could have come down here and said, "Kneel before me and serve me," because he truly is worthy of that, said he wasn't going to do it. He said he came to be served. We're not above anything. We're not above any task. Even Eve, she concluded that when she saw that appealing fruit dangling in front of her, she concluded that that would give her the wisdom of God. And she believed the lie that the enemy was telling her, that this would make you just like God. You'll know everything that he knows, good and evil. You see, it's the pride that's a root cause for a lot of things. It's a root cause for the strife in many of our families and within many churches and nations, gatherings just in general. We need to resist that temptation. That is going to resist the devil, and the Bible tells us he will flee from us. And doing that, resisting him, that's accomplishing and completing a will of God, because he doesn't want us to fall to those things. He doesn't want us to be tripped up. You know, in 1 John chapter 2, verse 17 says, "The man who does the will of God lives forever." Lives forever. Now, we went through a lot of these things here, and I'm going, you might be saying, "Richard, I don't really struggle with any of these." You know what? I'm good. I'm glad. That makes me so happy. That's just what I want to hear. But just like when Ben was going through the book of Jude, and he said, we don't really have a problem right now, we're taking some preventative action. I think we should take some preventative action here when it comes to these lies. Be aware of what his tactics are, what his multi-tool set is, so that we don't just stumble upon it one day and find ourselves, "You're fine, don't worry about a thing." We need to be aware of these things because those lies are swarming all around us. The lies, they have a purpose and they have an intention. And the purpose and the intention is that the enemy is using them to seek, destroy, kill, and steal God's will for us and God's promise of a future for us. It's what he wants to do. He wants to come in and take these things from us. He wants us to not have what God has planned for us. In the book of John, still, John chapter 10, verse 10, he describes the enemy as the thief who comes only to steal and kill and destroy. And in 1 Peter 5, verse 8, he puts it like this. Be alert and of sober mind. Your enemy, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion, looking for someone to devour. So what he's doing, he's looking around for someone to devour. You give him just a little bit of an opportunity, he's going to pounce on it. So if you did find yourself in the position of saying, hey, I don't really struggle with any of these things, you know, the very last one was pride, right? So let's not go out of this room today thinking that we're above and better than everybody else and fall subject to pride. Because he's ready to pounce if you give him the opportunity. God's will, God's promises of a future, it pertains to our lives here, and it pertains to the future of what he has through the doorway of death, which is everlasting life. God's will, here we're going to take a look at 1 Timothy, verse 2, chapter 4. God, it's his desire for all to be saved and know the truth. He wants to save you, but he doesn't want you to be tripped up by the lies. He wants you to know the truth of things. And everybody's favorite verse in Jeremiah 29:11 says, For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not harm you. The lies will harm you. Plans to give you a hope and a future. The lies don't have any hope for you. The lies doesn't have a future for you. The future, again, is what God has in store for you, which is life. And it's the life that we find through the doorway of death when everlasting life happens. This might be a little shocking to you because it was kind of a little shocking to me when I did the research of things. Multiple sources came through with this, so I feel comfortable with it. There are 4,000 to 10,000 ads vying for your attention as an average American every single day. That's the average that an American is exposed to daily, 4,000 to 10,000. And that's not just ads because you're thinking TV. You see more in 5 seconds on this thing than you ever thought you'd ever see. The ads are everywhere. You see them driving down the road. So let's take that kind of conservatively. That's 4,000 voices vying for your attention. And I don't think that it makes sense to listen to all of those other voices when we have God's voice to listen to. And we should listen to his because he is real. He does exist. He does desire to have a relationship with you. He wants to have an abundance life. He wants you to have an abundance life. I encourage you today to silence the many voices that are all around you. The things that you hear outside of that. Sit still. Listen for God's voice, that small, still voice. Because that voice that you hear, it's Jesus. And he states back in the book of John, chapter 10, verse 27, My sheep hear my voice, and I know them, and they follow me. In every situation, we need to look to Jesus. I know it was a cliche 90s thing, what would Jesus do? But it's applicable. What would Jesus do? What would he think? What would he say? How would he act? To know these things, you have to spend some time with him. You have to have a conversation with him. Just like how I have a pretty good idea about what Haley's going to think and do because she's my wife and I spend time with her. Same is true with Jesus. You spend some time with him, you're going to know how he would handle some of the situations that you find yourself in. Here's the wonderful thing about once we hear his voice and we start to follow. It's the immediate verse after in verse 28 that says, I give them eternal life, and they will never perish. No one can snatch them away from me. Your future is secured in Jesus. Your eternity is secured in Jesus. If you have a relationship with Him, that is Jesus, I encourage you to keep it strong. Keep it going, so as to not get tripped up. Because though He'll never lose you because of once He has you, our verse right here clearly says, no one can snatch you away. You getting caught up in the lies doesn't give you a life of joy and abundance life that God desires for you. If you do not know Jesus, if you do not have a relationship with Him, I urge you to ask Him today to silence the other voices, so that you can hear His voice and that you can follow Him. And you can follow Him with reckless abandon. He'll never leave you. Be the only one that can give you the true satisfaction that you're looking for. And He loves you so much. He desires to save you. He desires for you to have an eternal life with Him. Don't let the enemy snatch you away from Him with his lies. Because if you don't have a relationship with Him, the devil can still snatch you.